All right, so we see Jacob. Jacob has sent his wife and his family man away and spending some time alone for a little bit. And in the process of spending some time alone, he's really waiting on an encounter from his past when he encounters God. Now that right there is will speak all by itself. That he literally is waiting for an encounter from his past that he is dreading, that he is not looking forward to, and he encounters God in the process of that. And so we see Jacob in that place that he begins to have this encounter with God as he's kind of running from his past. And this is kind of what I want to preface this with this morning. I have taught you a lot of things about identity, about living your dream versus, or living God's dream versus somebody else's dream for your life, and your identity being stolen, and understanding that you are a priest of the new covenant, a minister of the new covenant, and that you have the ability to speak life into your environment, that your identity dictates the identity of your environment. There's a lot of things that we've talked about with identity, but the one thing that I want to share with you this morning is that God will give you revelation or understanding or a plan of your life, and between the understanding or the revelation or the dream or whatever it is of that plan and its destination, there will be an identity decision in the middle of that. There you will encounter somewhere in there, and maybe even several times you'll have to reshape or recreate or shift your identity. But there will be an identity decision between your dream and your destination. All right? There will be an identity decision. You can't process throughout it without that happening. It's necessary because that identity decision is really going to drive your direction to whether you wind up in the destination God has for you or whether you wind up in the destination that somebody else has planned for you. And so there will be a decision that has to be made concerning that identity between your dream and your destiny. And the thing about it is that we sometimes get excited, especially when we encounter God or when we begin to have an understanding of God, or even early on we'll have, I remember I was called to ministry when I was 18 years old, but I was 24 and a half before I ever sold out to God in that. But because what I did is I allowed that dream or that understanding of being called to ministry to kind of, I had this thought that it was going to thrust me into my destiny. That just having a plan or just having a vision was going to thrust me into who I am, and that's not the case at all. In order for me to be thrust into the direction that God has for my life, I had to make a decision. Just because God showed me something about who I was doesn't mean that's who I was. It means that's who I had the potential to be. He showed me the potential of my life. He showed me the potential of my dreams, but I had to make a decision. Was that who I was going to be or not? And so somewhere between the revelation or the dream of who you are and the destination that you will arrive in, you will make an identity decision, because you will not just fall into what God has for you. You follow me? It ain't going to happen. You ain't going to wake up out of bed one day and just feel totally different than you did the day before, and it just all shift. You ain't going to wake up out of bed with all the money in the world in your bank account. You ain't going to wake up with all your problems being dissipated. You're not going to wake up with the perfect marriage and the perfect children. It ain't going to happen. At some point in time, you've got to take the information of the kingdom principles and apply them to your life to begin to make destiny decisions. All right? Got to happen. You will not walk in dream just because God said it. Now that's going to mess with somebody's theology, because we think that just because God says it, it's going to happen. No. God has given something that's pretty incredible, and that's a decision. And that decision trumps literally God's choice. When He put us on earth, He said, listen, man, you've got a decision to make, and I'm not going to force you into that decision. You've got to decide that you want to be a kingdom man, and you've got to decide that you want to serve the King. And He said, here's your decision. What decision are you going to make? And I'm not going to force you into it. You follow me with that? And so he gives us that opportunity. We got to make a decision to become that person. And the reason that is because we have two different facets of potential. All right? We have two different facets of potential. Simply because of, and you see this even from the beginning of time, Adam and Eve were created in perfection, but yet they had two facets of potential. If that wasn't the case, then we wouldn't be in the scenario that we're in. But there's two facets of potential to every person. Because there is this king that is trying to war for your life, that is the king of all kings. But then you have the king of this earth that is also trying to war for your life and creating potential for you as well. And so you have the potential of being two different people. At all times in your life, that will never go away. You have the potential to be two different people, and we have to make a decision which one we're going to be. All right. And so there will be that destiny decision that is made between dream and destiny, or dream and arrival. So we've got to do that. So you see here in verse 22 and 23 that Jacob, he sends his people away. He sends his female servants away and his wife and his 11 sons, and he crosses over on the land that he had. And then he's sitting there waiting alone. And this is what I find interesting, is that so many times when we get into a place of beginning to wrestle with who we are, we never want to be alone. We will surround ourselves with people so that we don't have to confront ourselves. We'll surround ourselves, man. We'll try to get whoever we can. It don't even matter sometimes. It ain't even church folk we trying to get around us. We just want to be around somebody. We'll call we laying in bed at home at night at 10 o'clock and looking for somebody to call and somebody to text, just because right now I'm in a quiet, alone place and I'm wrestling with who I am inside, and I can't stand to look at myself. And so the more I can get around, man, the better I feel, the more comfortable I feel, the better I feel about myself, because I can look at them and I don't have to look at me. Come on now, I'm starting to preach now. It's getting revved up. All right? And so we won't get to a place to where we want to be alone. We'll keep as many people as we can around us when we're in a place of trying to discover this identity. All right, we'll keep folks around, man. We don't want to push people away. We want to invite them in. And then again, it don't matter who it is, what they look like, where they come from, whether they saved, whether they not saved. We don't matter if they're yoked or unequally yoked. We just want people around us, so I ain't got to look at me. But God is driving you to a place that you have to look at you. All right. He's wanting to get you to a place that you have to look at you and be alone with yourself to face who you really are. See, some of us are not only afraid to be alone, but we're afraid to be alone with God. I believe that the thing in your Christian walk that is the most combated is prayer, because it requires you to be alone with God. See, we'll come to corporate prayer or intercessory prayer, but we won't find a place where we are alone in prayer. And I'm just telling you the truth, because I wrestle with it. The hardest thing in my life to be persistent in and to walk in every day with consistency and persistency is being alone in a moment of prayer time with God. And it's not that I don't desire God at all. It's the reality is that sometimes I get alone and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to think. I'm confronted with, what do I do now? What do I say now? What do I look at? What do I pray for? What do I ask for? What do I listen for? I don't know what to do, so sometimes you just don't do it. And so I'm not just afraid to be alone with myself. Now I'm afraid also to be alone with God. And we're afraid to be alone with God because when we confront God in our place of being alone, it causes a reflection of self because we see His image. And so when we get in the presence of God and spend that moment and that time alone with Him and see how wonderful God is and allow the Holy Spirit then to begin to reflect our life to us, we see really how short we come to get to His glory. But God is not trying to bring you to that place to punish you. He's not trying to bring that place to discourage you. He's trying to bring you to that place literally to wipe out your image so that He can pour His on you. He wants you to see how incredible His image is, and you'll forget about who you've been and start pursuing who God is. But we won't allow ourselves to get in a place of being alone with God, because the first thing we must do in that alone time is look at me. I have to look at myself. I have to look at the bad decisions. I have to look at the times this week that I've promised God I would do this and I didn't walk it out. I have to face God with, I know what He's been telling me, and I know what He's been talking to me about, and what He's been pushing me into, and the dreams He's been showing me, and the opportunities He's been putting before me, and I ain't one time stepped into them. So I don't want to be alone with God. And God said, but here's the thing, is that you will not enter into destiny and escape an encounter with me. You will not walk into the dream of your life and escape my presence, because they coincide. They're one and the same. Literally, the thing that you're walking in your life is what I've created, and so in order for you to get there, it will come through my path. And so if you're ever going to become what God is showing you can become, you have got to be measured against him and look at yourself and have to confront yourself. And so he does that. Jacob gets in this place, man, he passes everybody away, and now he's alone, and he's sitting there, and he's wrestling with his past. He's wrestling with what he's about to potentially have to face, and that's not even God, but that's the mistakes of yesterday. He's literally waiting and dreading because he's about to have to face the failures of yesterday. Are you following me? He's waiting. He has heard that yesterday is about to show up. He's heard that the consequences of former decisions are about to show up in his life, and now he's got to face them, and he ain't got nowhere to turn to. All right? And so he's alone, waiting for his past to slap him in the face. Y'all ain't never been there, have you? Alone, waiting for the bad decisions of yesterday to rear their head in consequence. That's where he's at. Laying there waiting, man. I'm pushing everybody away. Honestly, he is literally in a place to where he's growing in maturity because now he's at least willing to confront it. Are you following me? Now he's at least willing to be alone. He's willing to confront the mistakes of yesterday and not run from it any longer. Now, what I find funny, though, is if you read a little bit earlier in chapter 32, that you will see that he did revert to some of his old ways when his past was coming. He reverted to trying to bribe and trying to manipulate and trying to soften the blow a little bit when his past was coming to face him. But he realized, man, before he could ever walk out in being his former self, now listen, before he could ever literally manifest his former self, God showed up. Man, yeah, that's got to excite you a little bit. He thought about it. He attempted to walk, but before it ever made its way, God showed up. The grace of God in his life said, I'm not satisfied with who you've been, and I'm not satisfied with leaving you where you're at. And so before you ever are able to take a step deeper into it, I'm going to confront you. And we dread that confrontation, but in reality, man, it's literally an eternal opportunity. It's a kingdom opportunity. And so he's wrestling in this place, man. He's alone. And then in this place that he's, of this comfort zone, listen, let me tell you this, back up and say this first of all. We won't push people out of our life because it creates a comfort zone for us, and inside of our comfort zone, there ain't never a confrontation. That's why we keep it comfortable, because we don't want confrontation. Confrontation forces a decision to be made that something has to change. All right? And so we will keep people around because it creates a comfortable space for me that I don't have to deal with confrontation. But God says, listen, if anything is going to change in your life, there's got to be confrontation. You are going to have to confront it. You are going to have to look it in its face, and you are going to have to tell it who's boss. You can't walk in destiny of your life and still allow your past to trail behind. At some point in time, there's got to be a line drawn in the sand that there was a confrontation that took place that said, I no longer tolerate the decisions of my past, but now I'm going to look it in the face and tell it who's king. Because until I step up and tell it who's king, it's going to continue to follow me. And I need to look it in the eyes and tell you no longer belong in my environment. My past decisions no longer belong in who I am. And so at some point, I got to quit building a comfort zone around me so that there can be a confrontation. All right? So while you looking to remove the confrontation, I'm going to tell you right now, there must be a confrontation in your life. And I'm not even talking about with others. I'm talking about with yourself. There's got to be a confrontation with self in order for you ever to be a destiny figure. Has to happen. So God has got him in this place, man, and he creates a confrontation. And he creates a confrontation in Jacob's fleeing his past, and Jacob's fleeing his failures. The grace of God, and when we're trying, I don't care who you talk to that has made a kingdom decision, they will never tell you that they encountered God in running from who they were. Are you following me? They encountered God in running from who they were. Let me tell you, even if they encountered God in a church, they were still running from religiosity. And so it don't make a difference whether you are involved in just the mundane practices of the religious world or whether you are involved in just complete rebellion and sin. The reality is that in running from who you are is when you'll meet up with God. Because until you realize that there's a need to run from who I am, God ain't necessary in your life. And so it will always come from you running from your past when you confront God. And God will show up in the middle of that. You don't even know where you're running to. I'm just trying to get away. And God says, well, I'm right here. There ain't never nowhere you can run. There ain't a path you can take. There ain't a decision that you can make that God has not already got this, where He's going to intercede on your behalf because He cares so much about what He's trying to develop in you that He will move heaven and earth just to have an encounter with you. Then you have to make a decision. Will you respond to the encounter? But He will create the encounter. He will create the encounter. And so God creates the encounter with Jacob while he's running from his past and fleeing from what happened yesterday. God has this encounter with him and just creates this opportunity. Now, in verse 24, it says, and Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, if you don't completely understand the language and even the punctuation there or the capitalization, he wrestled with God. This is who he's wrestling with. Jacob's wrestling with God. All right? And what I like about this is that there will be a fight between who you are and who you're supposed to be. There will be a fight between the one that's being ruled by the king of the earth and the one that's being ruled by the king of kings. There will be a wrestling match. It has to happen. All right? And so there will be that fight that takes place between the two identities that you have the potential to be, and one of them is going to come out on top. God creates the opportunity for Jacob to flee his past and encounter who he can be, but they enter into a wrestling match in the process. God says there ain't no way around this, man. I've set up the ring. I've created the opportunity. I brought the announcer in, and now you're going to have to fight this thing out to determine who's going to walk out on top and what destiny you're going to walk in. But it will not happen without an encounter of yourself in fighting which man you will be. You will live the rest of your days with the man that God has built you to be and the man that you have walked in being, battling each other constantly. Paul said, man, I got to crucify myself, my flesh daily. Paul, we talking about Paul, the greatest preacher that ever lived, said I got to wake up every day and confront who I could be with who I really am. And every day I got to make a destiny decision, a kingdom decision that says I know who I'm going to be, and I'm going to be the man that honors the King of Kings, and I'm no longer going to walk in the man of my past. But I got to confront it every day. And so I don't know who's told you what or what's been taught in a church culture maybe you've been in, but there will never be a time in your life that you completely escape who you've been. All right? There will never be that moment in your life that you will ever completely escape. Will you grow in authority to conquer that person? Absolutely. But that thing will always be there to remind you of who you could be. I'm jumping ahead of myself. You don't believe me? Look at the hip. That reminder is always there of who you can be. That reminder is always there of the pain that was inflicted in the struggle of who you can be and who you have been. But that's the person that you'll wrestle with, and you'll have to make a decision over every day. You'll have to make a decision. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. That's being able to make a decision to conquer self. That's what that is. God would not have said that's one of the fruits of my Spirit if it was not necessary that you were going to fight somebody that could be completely adverse to my desire for your life. But you are going to wrestle with that every day of your life. And so you've got to get to a place that you understand the image of God and that you have a revelation of who you are and that you encounter who you have been and make a decision. And the moment you make that decision, man, it literally changes everything. Because the first decision is always the hardest. The first decision to say I'm not willing to be who I have always been is always the hardest. Because that's the strongest pull from the enemy. If he can whip you before you get started, then he will. But as your momentum builds in the kingdom, you start to understand who you are and what your identity is, your confrontations with him become really less of a confrontation and more of an authoritation, if that's a word. That's my word today. You will learn to become a person of authority over the adversary in your life. And your greatest adversary will be yourself and not Satan. Y'all all right this morning? Somebody holler, do a jumping jack, do something. So now, here's the thing, is that Jacob only wrestled when he encountered God. You follow me? Jacob only wrestled when he encountered God. Jacob only got in a confrontation when he encountered God. Why? Because there wasn't nothing to wrestle with before he met God. There was no other potential to be understood before he had to. While he was walking in his old self and his former self and what he was comfortable being, there wasn't no sense in fighting with nobody. Because this is who I am and this is all I know. This is what I've walked in. This is what I've been called. This is what everybody's called me my whole life. I've been a liar. I've been a cheat. I've been a thief. This is who I am. I ain't fighting with nobody because this is who I am. And then God shows up and says, but it's not who I built you to be. And now that I'm here, you're always responsible for information. Are you following me? You become accountable to revelation of information. God shows up and gives revelation of information that says this is who you have the potential to be, and now we got a war. But it wasn't until that moment that he encountered God that a war was necessary. So let me say this. Let me encourage you this morning. If you have been in a place in your life of warring within you, you need to be excited because the only reason you're warring is because you have encountered God. You have encountered the possibility of who you can be. Are you following me? You have encountered God. You have encountered who God has built you to be and said you can be, and now there's a struggle that's going. There is not a struggle until there's opportunity. All right? There's not a struggle until there's opportunity. There's no wrestling until there's revelation. I can throw them all out at you. You can write them down, tweet them, whatever. There is no struggle until there's opportunity. You will not war over one option. You will not fight and stress over one identity. It's only when you're confronted with the possibility of another that you become conflicted with who you are. We see that internal pain and that internal struggle of who I'm trying to be and who I'm trying to figure out every day. And we look at that war as being a place of pain and struggle when in reality it's a place of blessing. Because it's only in that pain or struggle that new opportunities and new revelation and new levels are at your feet. All right? And so we literally wrestle with that pain and thinking that I'm failing God and life stinks, man, and everything's going sour. And God's like, no, the whole reason that you're wrestling right now is because there's a new doorstep ahead. You wouldn't have a struggle unless there was an opportunity to excel. And now in verse 26, watch, it says, and he said, let me go for the day breaks. And he said, I ain't letting you go until you bless me. Jacob says, I've been wrestling with you. I've been wrestling with this identity. I've been wrestling with the encounter of who I am and who I can be. And I'm not letting you go until you bless me. I'm not losing my grip on who you've come and encountered me. I ain't letting you go now until you tell me who I am. See, I didn't ask for this. I was trying to run from my past, but you showed up in your grace on my doorstep and created a confrontation with me. And so now that you created the confrontation, Jack, I ain't letting it go for nothing. You're going to tell me who I am before you get out of here. I ain't letting you go. I'm not letting you go until you bless me. I'm not wrestling with this thing for nothing. Here, let me tell you, do not walk out of the place of your wrestling and not have anything to show for it. Don't leave your fight and have nothing but scars. Scars are all right to show off when you know you won the fight. Are you following me? Don't nobody want to show the scars they got beat up in. Everybody want to show the scars that they whooped the other person in. Don't show it. Listen, don't walk away from a fight without knowing that you won and I've been blessed. Show off what God is doing in your life. And so he looks at him and he says, man, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And he says to him, what's your name? Now this right here is the key in it all. God says, well, what is your name? Now how do we move from you blessing me to what is your name? How do we move from God, I need you to bless me. I'm not leaving this war without you blessing me. And God says, well, what is your name? Let me give you a little history. Jacob, the name Jacob means supplanter. All right. It also means supersede by force. Now, if you don't know the history of Jacob, Jacob was that little thief and liar that robbed his brother of his birthright and his blessing. You follow me? You track this thing back to chapter 25 and 26. We see that the wrestling of Jacob and Esau, and we see that even Mama created the opportunity for Jacob to be a little rebellious cat. And Jacob sits there and robs his brother's birthright and his brother's blessing. And so he lived his life to this point in deception. Not only did he live his life in deception and lies, but that was his name. So he lived his life with everybody telling him, you're a liar, you're a thief. You've gotten what you've gotten in life by force, but not because of blessing, but because you deceived your way into it. And so God looks at him and says, what's your name? He causes Jacob to look at who he has been and confess it. He says, I can't bless you until you confess and confront who you've been. I can't bless you. I can't teach you. I can't shift anything in your life until you bring what you've been and who you've been and the mindset you've been living in to the forefront and allow that thing to be expelled, because as long as you keep it down inside who you are, it will always reside in you. And if I pour my blessing on you, my blessing will be contaminated with your past. And so I'm causing you, before I bless you, to bring who you have been out of your service and confess it out and expel it before I can pour who I am into you. Come on now. You all right with that? So he said, man, bless me. And he said, well, what's your name? He made him tell him his name. God knew his name. God wanted to hear him confess it. God wanted to hear him say, I'm not satisfied with Jacob. I'm not satisfied with who I've been. I'm not satisfied that I've been a deceiver. I'm not satisfied that I've been a liar. I'm not satisfied that this is what people have looked at me and called me my whole life. I'm not satisfied with what I've done. I'm not satisfied with where I've been. I'm not even satisfied with what I've obtained, the way I've attained it. There ain't nothing about my past that I'm satisfied with, because I did it absent from who you built me to be. So what's your name? It's Jacob, but I'm tired of hearing it. Come on. Anybody gotten tired of hearing who you used to be? Has anybody gotten tired of hearing those around you call you who you used to be? Reminds you of what happened yesterday. Reminds you of what took place last week. Reminds you of what you did when you were 15. Don't make no difference that you're 40 now. You still getting reminded at Thanksgiving dinner about what you did when you were 15. You've been married 28 years and she keeps telling you what happened on the honeymoon. You follow me? You keep running into old teachers and they keep talking about who you used to be. Your brother's trying to go to school now, but your brother can't get blessed because of what you did yesterday. You follow me? And so we're constantly reminded of who we used to be, and we get to a place. The only time we'll get to a place of shift in our life is when we have to confront who we used to be and get rid of it and say, I'm tired of being called Jacob. And God looks at him and says, but that's all you've ever answered to. So I'm going to ask you this morning, what you going to answer to? Because until you tell me who you have been and you are willing to confess and confront who you have been, I can't tell you who you can be. Until you get dissatisfied and intolerant of who you have been, I can't show you where you can advance to. So in wrestling with God, he says, man, bless me. And God says, I'll bless you when you confess what you've done. I'll bless you when you get rid of who you've been. When you get dissatisfied with who you've become, I'll bless you. I know I can bless you when you get so frustrated with your path that you don't want to turn to anything but me. But you got to, what's your name, boy? What's your name? What's your name? See, again, your identity decision will determine your direction. God was confronting him with a decision because his decision at this moment would determine his direction. And you'll have to confront and confess who you have been. God called him to confess that. Now watch. God then says, well, let me go back. Did I miss it? Yes, I'm sorry. And so once he got a confession and a confrontation out of him, God says, your name shall no longer be called your past. Your name shall now be called your future. I'm declaring who you are. I'm not interested in what everybody else has said about you. I'm declaring what I say about you. But you got to make a decision which name you're going to answer to. See, I want to know what's your name, because I know what you've been called. I know when they call you out, who turns their head. And they'll keep calling you that until you quit answering. See, it ain't what your name is, it's what you answer to. It ain't, hey, listen, man, I know folk that the mom and daddy gave them one name and they changed it when they was 5 years old because they liked it better, and that's what they've been called the rest of their life, so it don't make no difference what's on their birth certificate. They've been called Rerun their whole life and their name is Robert. You follow me? It don't make a difference what your name is. It's what you answer to. And God was bringing him to a place that he had to decide, what am I going to answer to? Am I tired of hearing Jacob? And God says, if you get tired of hearing Jacob, then I'm going to call you Israel. Because Israel means prevails with God. It no longer means that you're a deceiver. It no longer means that you're a liar. It no longer means that you're a thief. It no longer means that you're mischief. It no longer means that you cause pain to others. It no longer means that you get what you get by force. Now your name means that you win with God. And if you dig deeper into the meaning of Israel, you'll get prevails with God as the forefront meaning. But if you get deeper into the meaning of Israel, it actually means undivided kingdom or undivided people. We have a man right now that is wrestling in a place of division between two people. And God says, listen, it's time for division to leave. It don't make a difference what your past said. It's time to be unified under my voice, under my anointing, to know who you are in the kingdom. And if you walk this thing out, you'll walk out a kingdom of undivided people. You'll walk out an undivided kingdom. But who are you going to answer to? Will you continue to answer to Jacob, or are you going to answer to Israel? Who are you? Are you willing to win with God, or are you willing to fail? Are you willing to get up, man, and get on this thing and become something in my presence and become something in my kingdom? Or are you still going to try to get what you're trying to get by doing it the wrong way? Are you still going to try to get to the top with cutting people's legs out from under them? Are you still going to try to sleep your way to the CEO position? Are you still going to try to get your job by blackballing other people? Are you still trying to get the upper hand in your family by telling mama and daddy and cousins and all that what your brothers and sisters used to do? Who you want to be? You going to answer to Jacob, or you going to answer to Israel? You going to answer to what everybody's called you? Going to answer what God called you? Because it's two different potentials. It's two different potentials. He says, listen, I'm going to tell you your name's Israel. But some folks still like their old name. I'm just going to tell you right now, no matter how hard you try to make a king in your old name, there ain't no king in that name. You'll only find the king in the name that the king gives you. Are you following me? But we'll keep trying to elevate and promote and work our way and trying to build something with our comfort zone and with what we've always done and who we've always been and what everybody's always called us. And God says, no, you're going to have to shift your routine and your understanding if you're going to be king. But are you interested in being a pawn, or are you interested in being a prince? What you want to be? What you going to answer to? God will force you into that place of identity and cause you to choose it. He creates this life for you, but your opposition also creates this life, as I've said. And the only way, both of them have potential. Both of them have potential. But the only way the potential of either is released is by a decision. That's it. God will not force his way on you. God will not force you to think like him. He will not force you to act like him. He will not force you to operate like him. But that potential that you hold to become something marvelous is incredible, but it will only be released by a decision. And so either way you go, the enemy is going to store up your past and who you've been and who you can continue to be. And you'll always identify with it, and it will always be easy to walk in because it's who you've been. Let me say this. I know the junk I did. You follow me? And most of the junk I did, now listen to me for a minute, because this is going to probably be all sacrilegious or whatever, against your doctrine too. The junk I did, I had fun doing. It felt good. You with me? It was all, really, it felt good. It was fun. I had a good time. I bragged about it. Whatever, man. It was cool. It was the thing. I got to talk about it with my friends. I got to share my stories. I would not have walked in it if it was not something that was not appetizing to me. Does your appetite change just because your name changes? Come on. If you like steak while you were Jason, you're going to like steak while you're Rick. You follow me? So here's where the decisions come in, is that who I am will always be appetizing to me. Therefore, I always have the potential of being who I used to be. What makes the difference is that I look that man in the eye and I say, but that ain't who I am no more. That ain't who I'm satisfied with being. No, it was fun. And would I, with my flesh, enjoy the pleasure of doing it again? You better believe it would. But is that who I am? Now, see, you have to make a decision of who you are based on what God says, not based on the appetizing of your flesh. Because your flesh will lie to you. The flesh will lie. Just like Jacob lied, man, to his daddy, your flesh will lie to you. To try to advance you into something that creates a deeper stronghold and bondage in your life. It's fun. I could walk out of here today, drop this whole pastoring thing, this whole church thing, run back doing what I was doing, lose my family and all that, and it would feel great. You follow me? It would create a lot of emotional and mental pain after a while. But to my flesh and to the pleasure sense, it would feel great. I'd have a good time. But I would find myself back in that place of being alone again, that I had to confront who I really was. So at some point, man, in that confrontation, I got to decide, I ain't Jacob no more. Do I always have the potential to be Jacob? Am I going to go back to my hometown and they're going to call me Jacob? Yeah. But you know when they'll quit calling me Jacob is when I start answering to Israel. Is when I start going back to my Thanksgiving dinners and I start looking my daddy in the face and I start looking at my brothers and my cousins in the face and my old teachers and my old homies I used to roll with, and I don't answer to what they call me anymore. That's when they'll realize that their language has got to change. I may can still walk in my lifestyle, but I can't call him that no more. So you'll begin to shift and here's the thing, oh Jesus, thank you Lord, is that when you make a decision about who you are and then you confront them with who you've become, it will cause them to have to look at themselves. And say, well, if he changed his name, then should I change mine? If he changed his name and begin to declare something different about his life and walking out this kingdom thing with God, then maybe I need to look at who I am and make a decision. Maybe I need to have a confrontation in my life. Are you following me? But it will change the things around you when you stop answering to what you used to be called. God says, man, what's your name? He says, Jacob, but I want to be Israel. Now watch, in verse 26 again, it says, let me go for, I will not, don't let me go until I bless you. And then in verse 29 now, Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And then God says, why is it that you ask my name? And we never really get the whole answer to that, but then he blesses him. So he asks in verse 26 to be blessed. I ain't letting you go till you bless me. Verse 29, God blesses him, but the blessing didn't come until the name changed. Are you following me? The blessing didn't come until Israel said, no, I'm no longer Jacob, but now I'm Israel. I'm satisfied with who you're building me to be. Now will you bless me? Now this is good. We never see anything material change hands. But we are a materially driven people. And so we only consider blessing to come in material form. And so we look at this and say, well, how in the world did Jacob or Israel get blessed and I never saw nothing change hands? I never saw God open up his bank account and pour him a bunch of money out. I never saw him load him up with cattle and goats and sheep and all these things. I didn't see anything material change hands. All I saw was that he changed his name. The greatest blessings with God don't come in material form, they come in revelational form. Because revelation, like I said, is always the doorway to a new level. And when you reach new levels with God, man, you won't be able to explain what God has in store for who you're becoming. And so God has a bigger picture of this thing. It says, man, the way I'm going to bless you is I'm going to show you greater about who you are. And if you get a greater understanding about who you are, you'll walk in a greater environment and a greater prosperity. You will walk as a king if I show you how to be one. But I can't hand you a crown until you start making kingdom decisions. And so you're asking me to pad your bank account, and I'm trying to change your atmosphere and your environment and your thinking. You're asking me to give you possessions so that you can show off what you, and all I want you to do is walk in your authority of who you are, and your possessions and your blessings will follow. God says, I've got this whole perspective thing worked out and I will bless you, but man, you won't see a lot of things change hands sometimes. I'm going to give you greater understanding about who you are. Because as you walk deeper into what God is building for your life, man, the resources of your life must obey your voice. But it will only happen when you gain an understanding about who you are in the kingdom. God ain't never had to beg for nothing to happen. And God's trying to build you like him. If he builds you like him, if he can get you to answer it to Israel instead of Jacob, you'll begin to operate and function in your environment just as God does. And all God has to do is call on the resources he needs to fulfill his purpose. And so if he can give you revelation of the purpose of your life and begin to change the name that you answer to, all you got to do is begin to walk like God. And everything about the purpose and the destiny you're walking, it has a responsibility to follow. Ain't nothing changed hands but a name change. Nothing changed hands but revelation. God blessed Jacob, but he blessed him with revelation. And that revelation presents opportunities for a new level that you couldn't previously walk in. Imagine then that if you've walked in here this morning still answering to an old name, the things that wait for you when you simply make a decision to answer to a new one. You think about the frustrations that you've walked in, and your environment is frustrated because, like I taught you last week, your environment is trying to discover who it is, and it can't be who it is until you're who you are. And so your finances are frustrated, and your relationships are frustrated, and your job is frustrated, and man, your car won't start to get you to church, and everything is just, everybody on Facebook is cursing you, and your family, you ain't even gonna be able to go to Thanksgiving this year because, man, they just so disappointed in who you've been. And the reality is, man, God says you're gonna be Israel, you're gonna be Jacob. Which one? Because when you change your understanding, everything that is literally on hold for your life right now has to begin to pour. Everything. Now it will come according to my, and when I say my, I'm speaking as God. It will come according to my direction and as I understand and unfold the purpose of your life. So I may not pour it all out at one time, but you will never go with less than what you need to accomplish what I'm building for your life. Never. What name are you going to answer to? What name are you going to answer to? Why don't y'all stand up? I'm going to show you something really quickly before we get out of here. Really quickly, let's look at 28. Now I'm going to cram a bunch of verses in here really quickly. You don't have to try to memorize it all. I just want to build the parameters of what I'm trying to show you. Chapter 28 says this. This is earlier. Now remember, this is before the encounter. This is before the identity decision. And he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head, and he lay down at that place to sleep. And then he dreamed. He had a dream, right? He had a vision. It wasn't tangible. It was a dream. And behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to the heavens. And there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give you and your descendants. I'm building your destiny. I'm building your vision right now. Right. You with me? Also your descendants shall be as of the dust of the earth. And you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and the south. And in you and in your seed all of the families of this earth shall be blessed. And behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will bring you back to the place I'm showing you right now. And I'll bring you back here, and I won't leave you until you've done what I've spoken to you. And then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. Now watch this. Now remember chapter 32, we had an identity decision. Had a dream, an identity decision, and now we got a destiny. Then God appeared to Jacob again. And when he came from Padan Aram and he blessed him, and God said, your name is Jacob, and it shall no longer be called Jacob. Remember, I told you it was going to be Israel. And so he called his name Israel, and God said to him, I am God Almighty. Now watch. He told Jacob, or Israel, the same thing he told Adam. Be fruitful and multiply. Don't you remember the vision that I gave you before you made an identity decision? That I told you that your descendants would be of the dust of the earth? Don't you remember everything that I showed you that you had the ability to walk in? Because you made a decision, a destiny decision by an identity decision, then this is your land. And all the descendants that I'm giving you, this will be their land. And then God went up from that place where he talked with him. This was not a dream, this was an encounter. And so Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, and a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it, and he said, he called the name of the place where God spoke with him, Bethel. Moved from a dream to a destiny because of a decision. You follow me? Somebody this morning needs to make a decision. Somebody needs to decide what name you're going to answer to from now on. You've been called Jacob, but God said you're Israel. Now what I would ask you is, whose voice matters? Whose voice do you hold in prominence? Do you hold God's voice or your environment? Don't become a pawn. Don't become a servant. I like that better. Don't become a servant to what you were sent to shift. Don't become a servant to your environment when God said you were built to shift it. God said no longer become a slave to the land that I told you you could have. Why is your land determining your identity? Why is your land calling you by name? Why is your past calling you by name? Now here's the thing, the place of his dream and his destiny were the same place. Now, I don't know if you're catching that right now, but God ain't trying to whisk you away from your circumstances. God's giving you the dream of who you could be in your circumstances and in your location, because the place of your blessing and the place that you're king is the place you reside.